Chapter Xuanhuan Reckless Youth Part 1. The Jiamu tree stands in Dugwang, the celestial ladder between heaven and earth, 100 ren tall without branches. Its canopy forms clouds, its intertwined roots dividing into 9, corresponding to the 9 states of the land, covering the heart of the continent. History records its profound radiance, cohesive yet dispersed, neither flourishing nor withering, neither bearing fruit nor flower, for 3,300 years. Dodian Yuandox and Duguang. Yongzhou is located in the north, central part of the continent, beginning from the Fuyu mountain range, known as the world's North Pole, extending west to the Black Water, east to Jizhou, and south towards the Jiamu tree. The Great River Wang traverses Yongzhou from east to west. Dodian Dixinshun Yongzhou, Yujing, nestled against the southernmost foothills of the Fuyu mountain range, Kaijin Mountain, founded 1700 years ago. It began as a small town providing rest for jade miners, artisans and merchants because of its production of the precious jade yoyin, a superior material for cultivators. Refining it gradually prospered. Centuries ago, the jade veins began to dry up, and the city declined from its peak. However, leveraging its advantageous geographical location at the confluence of the Black Water and the Hong River, it focused on freight and trade, regaining its former prosperity. Yongzhou Local Gazette. Yujing, Yongzhou bustling port city. At the turn of spring and summer, the sky after the rain was bright and clear, as pure as a newborn's eyes. The west gate, closest to the docks, was always bustling, even in the rain. Now, a short time after the rain stopped, it had become somewhat crowded. The shops lining the Seaman City Gate entrance were packed with customers, a cacophony of noise. Shop assistants struggled to push their way out, hoisting the awnings they'd pulled in during the rain, seeking a gap to put them up again. Those already outside were figuring out how to carefully re-set up their stalls amidst the throng. Suddenly, from somewhere, a voice boomed like a clap of thunder. "Master Yan is here!" Instantly, the entire street, shopkeepers, customers, and passers-by alike froze. Like a pebble dropped into still water, the flow of people which had filled the road parted down the middle, surging outwards. Outside the west gate, a red, accompanied by white clouds, descended from the sky. As it touched the ground, a thunderous sound of hooves echoed close enough that even the nearby city gate seemed to tremble slightly. A flying spirit beast. In that breeze, one could vaguely make out the rider, a young man in red, his sleeves billowing like rising flames beneath him. The spirit beast's fur was white as fresh snow, fine as mist, its appearance resembling a vision of clouds and rainbows from afar. Then, rider and beast, like an arrow loosed from a bow, covered a distance of over 30 feet with each leap, racing towards the city gate. By the time the pair were just a distant speck, a squadron of blue-clad warriors, each riding a brown, black-necked gwyn to the west gate, showing no signs of slowing, charging forward. A tea house sat in the small square by the city gate, with space for only 5 square tables and 10 stools, yet it thrived. Most of its customers were travelers recently disembarked from the docks, finding respite in a cup of tea, a welcome treat after a long journey, a chance to learn about the local customs while they were at it. The tea house was bustling. Several men, with sun-baked seasoned travelers, engaged in hushed conversations. Is this the prelude to something big? Nonsense. If something truly were amiss, would those riffraff dare to shout my name so loudly? My friend, you're being overly cautious. Every city has its share of interesting characters. But what about the incident, a beast running through the city like that? The speaker, whose accent hinted at Yangzhou in the far east of the continent, spoke in a slightly raised tone, causing several diners at nearby tables to turn their heads. Beast? That's no mere beast. That's a spirit beast, a cloud dream causer. Haven't you heard of it? A snicker rippled across a table by the door. The rules were the same in Yujing as anywhere else. Neither man nor beast could fly within the city walls. Didn't you see Lord Yanlan just outside the gate? The remark sparked a wave of knowing chuckles. Cities across the continent are protected by warding arrays that prevent both cultivators and beasts from flying within their boundaries. It's common knowledge. Even the most exalted realmen and venerables would deliberately break this rule. The questioner fell silent, realizing his concern had been about the beast injuring people, not the city's flight restrictions, a clear sign of a country bumpkin. Just then, a chorus of shouts echoed from the streets ahead. Closer listening revealed the sounds of falling debris, fleeing crowds, and the occasional bestial roar. Had someone been observing from above, they would have witnessed this unfolding street scene. The boy in red, though unable to fly within the city walls, moved with the lightness of falling snow, each landing and takeoff flawlessly, navigating the gaps between people. The blue-clad soldiers following behind weren't so skillful. The first half of the street was a perilous dance through the crowds. The latter half, however, saw people reacting more slowly to the commotion, resulting in several overturned stalls and several pedestrians knocked down. Fortunately, nobody was directly trampled by the steeds. The patrons in the tea house needed no explanation. The commotion of horses startling the crowd was evident to all. Most simply looked on with knowing resignation. The man from Yangzhou shifted as if about to speak, only to be stopped by his companion's hand on his arm. The man who had previously chuckled, his eyes glinting, raised his voice slightly. "Gentlemen, away from home, all we yearn for is the safety and well-being of our mothers, wives and children. Therefore, wherever we go, remember the wisdom, adapt to local customs." Someone intrigued followed up. "And what are the local customs of Yujing?" The man smiled, opening the package on the table. Inside were 2 palm-sized rectangular pieces of good, a black fan with gold trim and no inscription, and finally, a small bowl bearing the inscription, "Wealth comes from the mouth." The audience understood at once. This was a storyteller. Some dropped coins into the bowl, urging him to begin, while others leaned in eagerly to listen. The storyteller didn't mind. He deftly spun the pieces of gilded wood in his palm, producing a clear, ringing sound before launching into his tale. Nowadays, travelers arriving in a new place must remember to obtain a protective charm, that is, the names of the most revered and powerful immortal sects and clans within each city. Ignorance of these matters could lead to unwitting offense, making the pursuit of good fortune and prosperity all the more difficult. This city is fortunate. It's not a city of cultivators, with no established immortal sects, and being a major commercial port, the rules are lax, and people are rather freewheeling. Just remember the 4 prominent clans, the Tu, Fu, Yan, and Lu families torn, you'll be fine. The storyteller then elaborated on the origins of Master Yan. The honorific felt a bit aged for Yan Kai Ting, who was barely of age, but it was due to his status as the master of Tiangong Kai Wu, the renowned artisan workshop in Yongzhou. With the old master deceased, Yan Kai Ting held immense power despite his youth. He was known as one of the Jade Capital 4 young masters. Yong, the second young master of the Tu family, Fu Mingxuan, the eldest son of the Fu family, and Lu Li, the Jade Capital seat holder of the Golden Valley Garden Merchant Guild. The storyteller, a master of rec, painted vivid pictures of local customs and people. When recounting real events, however, he employed a certain degree of literary license. However, the description of Master Yan's flamboyant and unrestrained nature, his fondness for courtesans, dancers, fine clothes, and exquisite food, certainly painted the picture of a dissolute young man. The shopkeeper, tending to the tea stove, closed his eyes as if in deep thought, seemingly oblivious to everything, whether the whispers were expressions of public concern, veiled criticism, subtle insinuations, or just street performers trying to drum up business. He didn't even flinch. More than 10 large bowls brimming with barley tea were arranged before the shopkeeper, next to a small bamboo basket for customers served themselves and paid as they pleased. He wouldn't open his eyes until the bowls were empty. Suddenly, the shopkeeper gave a start. He didn't fully open his eyes, just lifted his eyelids slightly, peering out through a narrow slit. At some point, besides the storyteller, only a young man in plain clothes remained in the teahouse. This was rather odd. Most teahouse patrons only stayed for a bowl of tea, and the earlier customers had already left. But it was nearly midday, usually the peak, and new customers should have been arriving steadily. Unless, the shopkeeper quickly glanced outside from the corner of his half-opened eyes. Unless someone was blocking the entrance to the teahouse in the small square outside. And who could control the flow of people so subtly? Right by the city gate, the shopkeeper seemed determined to keep his eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. At this moment, the youth in plain clothes rose and sat down at the storyteller's table. Chapter Arrows and Reckless Youth Part 2. The young man, barely of age, possessed a refined and gentle countenance, a tall and graceful figure, and a warm and composed demeanor that caused one to overlook his simple attire. As if facing a nobleman in a grand hall, beads of sweat were already visible on the storyteller's forehead. He had long noticed the unusual fluctuations in the crowd at the tea stall. He wasn't unwilling to leave, but the slightest movement of his legs, even while still seated, felt as difficult as pulling oneself from a mire. He had clearly fallen into a trap. Yet he was a cultivator of the upper realm, a net stage master, and even now, he didn't know whether he was trapped by a magical formation or some esoteric technique. He had truly been outmaneuvered. The youth in plain clothes spoke first. His manner was gentle and amiable, like neighbors chatting casually. You just said that Yujing is not a city for cultivators, which shows that you belong to a sect. I just wonder where your sect is located. The storyteller suddenly understood, and sweat poured forth even more profusely, his entire back drenched. The youth's first sentence had revealed where he had shown his non-ordinary nature. According to the Taoist scriptures, everyone in this world possesses a Tao seed, and everyone can cultivate, strengthening their bodies and minds to resist demonic harms and beast tides, protecting their homes, regardless of school or sect. The fundamental rules of cultivation are the same: simultaneous cultivation of combat and magical arts, body refinement for martial cultivators, and insightful comprehension for spell cultivators. Martial cultivation techniques originate from military art. There are 7 main branches: fist, saw, blade, spear, hammer, axe, and staff, and 13 more unconventional weapons including hook, whip, cudgel, and scythe. A martial cultivator who reaches the peak of the postnatal realm can cleave mountains with a single strike and sever rivers with a single blow. Spell cultivation emphasizes spontaneous enlightenment, thus leading to a multitude of technique, echoing the myriad paths of the Tao. Among the talismans, formations, music, and instruments are the 5 most prevalent, longest lasting, and most systematic branches. Upon achieving mastery, one attains supernatural abilities and is called a Grand Master. Upon witnessing the Tao, one is called a true person. Upon touching the Tao, one is called a Venerable One. Those who choose a single path among countless Taos and have the potential to independently establish a Tao are revered as sovereigns. However, while the practice of cultivation is relatively easy to begin, achieving mastery is exceedingly difficult. Most cultivators spend their entire lives without comprehending even a single minor supernatural ability. Even martial cultivators who reach the pinnacle of the postnatal realm, if they fail to break through to the next stage, remain unable to touch the threshold of the Tao. On the Futu ranking, standing at the center of the continent, the latest list contains only 1,131 individuals. In other words, among the billions of cultivators in this world, only slightly over 1,000 possess great supernatural abilities. The 4 sovereigns, Qinghua, Yanli, Bacon, and Boon, 27 venerables, and over 1,000 true persons. Each name represents a powerful force. Those not on the ranking but possessing minor supernatural abilities number roughly several thousand true persons, and tens of thousands of grandmasters, and that's all. This shows that the storyteller's offhand remark, "It's not a city of cultivators," inadvertently reveals his mindset after stepping onto the threshold of the Tao, looking down upon ordinary cultivators. Those who possess supernatural abilities, even minor ones, have achieved a level of Tao comprehension that is insurmountable for ordinary people, and their perspectives naturally differ. Many, looking back at ordinary cultivators, view them as beings of a different kind. The term city of cultivators is an internal distinction used by cultivation sects to differentiate between cities where they are stationed and other cities. There's no official classification. After all, while the influence of sects doesn't shift frequently, over centuries or millennia, changes still occur. Centuries ago, before the jade mines were exhausted, sects did reside in jade capital. Its prosperity then differed greatly from its current state as a trade and shipping hub. Yet, even as the storyteller sweated profusely, a chill ran down his spine, all because of the appellation of immortal master bestowed upon the young man in simple clothes. Taoist scriptures depict the celestial realm as a magnificent place paved with gold and silver, with precious trees lining the paths. Those who coexist with the celestial realm are called heavenly beings. Those from the lower realm who achieve Taoist mastery and ascend are called immortals. Ordinary cultivators can only look up to those with supernatural powers, hence the respectful term, immortal master. But how extraordinary must this youth in simple clothes be to silently subdue a cultivator of the net stage in the upper master realm? The net stage is only the second of 6 levels in the upper master realm, but the storyteller, by virtue of his profession and experience, possesses the supernatural ability to discern hidden presences. For him to be completely unaware and fall victim, his opponent must be at least 3 minor levels higher. Even if the youth in simple clothes borrowed the power of others, to be able to command a high-ranking upper master, his own identity must be either supremely prestigious or extremely powerful, making the title of immortal master deeply ironic. The storyteller stammered, "I dare not." His mind raced, weighing his words, but the other party clearly didn't intend to beat around the bush. The youth in simple clothes curled his right index finger and tapped it lightly on the table. He said. The youth's tone remained consistent, devoid of any particular emphasis, yet the storyteller felt a buzzing sound in his head, as if his skull were trapped inside a large bell, and someone outside was striking it with a mallet. The surname, the bearing, it all reminded the storyteller of someone, a sudden chill crawling up his spine from tailbone to crown. "For you are, Master Fu." The young man in simple clothes spoke calmly and confidently. "Fu Mingxuan," he repeated. "Where is the immortal master's place of cultivation?" The storyteller's face went deathly white. He could no longer maintain the composure expected of a cultivator, rising to his feet and bowing deeply in the manner of a disciple. "I, the inner affairs manager of the Observation Wind Pavilion." The Observation Wind Pavilion, while not yet among the 4 sects and 7 schools, was a renowned force on the continent. The pavilion wasn't known for its martial prowess, but its influence stretched across the land. It employed countless peddlers, itinerant merchants, and traveling salesmen as informants, utilizing unique intelligence-gathering methods to maintain an exceptionally well-connected network. Therefore, the pavilion's primary business was the buying and selling of information. Fu Mingxuan sat upright, a slight smile playing on his lips. What did my brother do to warrant the esteemed wind messenger's personal intervention? Qin Zheng's already pale face turned ashen, his expression even more strained. Even with the Observation Wind Pavilion's vast network, access to the core disciples' information of the 4 sects was impossible. How could he possibly know that Fu Mingxuan, a leading disciple of one of the 4 sects, hailed from Yujing and seemed to have close ties with Kai Ting? Qin Zheng knew that a wrong answer would be disastrous. He decided to be frank, and seeing the situation, made no attempt at pleading or mitigation, but recounted the events plainly and completely. He had been hired to spread rumors about Kai Ting's dissolute lifestyle in front of a visitor from Yangzhou. This outsider was the young master of the Yatian Gongfang, a renowned magical instrument manufacturer in Yangzhou, recently come of age, traveling and broadening his horizons while assessing potential suppliers and collaborators. At this point, the matter seemed like a common tactic in business competition. In fact, although Guangguan Pavilion sold information, it rarely took on jobs that required physical action. Qin Zhang's trip to Yujing was for official business. After the information transaction, the other party made this request. The intermediary was a friend he had known for many years, and it only required a quarter of an hour's delay on the way out of the city, so he readily agreed. Qin Zheng initially dismissed it as a serious prank. Having witnessed Kai Ting's reckless riding in the bustling city, adding a bit of trouble for a local dandy didn't seem like a big deal. His cultivation, in any non-cultivator city, would allow him to stand on equal footing with the elders of prominent families, and he wasn't afraid of the Yan family's subsequent pursuit. Who knew he would encounter the main target, but instead stumbled upon this formidable presence. However, Qin Zhang still adhered to the rules, explaining the ins and outs of the matter but refusing to reveal the names and identities of the client and intermediary. Fu Mingxuan didn't press him too hard, only clarifying that the client was an insignificant small trading firm in the East City. However, such shops were numerous, and it was difficult to determine whose peripheral forces they were, if they followed the line of the Yan family's competitors. But whether they were a smokescreen remained uncertain. "Next, please, Master Qin, grace my humble abode with your presence for a few days. Consider it a fated encounter in Yujing." Fu Mingxuan's were polite, yet the use of the declarative sentence betrayed his true intentions. Qin Zhang was prepared for this. understanding that he probably wouldn't be able to leave easily this time. News like that of a core disciple's origin from shaman sect wasn't so easily obtained. Without further struggle, he agreed and walked towards the door, where someone was already waiting to receive him. Fu Mingxuan remained seated, as if intending to stay a while longer. Master Qin, he mused. Are there other interesting things happening in this Yujing? Qin Zheng paused, then said, top left 3, bottom right 4. Fu Mingxuan had asked casually, not expecting Qing to actually give him an answer. Chapter Xuanhuan 3 Reckless Youth Part 2. To the left of the tea stall was a low-grade restaurant, but its location ensured high customer traffic, resulting in a 3-story building. The entire third floor consisted of private rooms. It wasn't mealtime, so most rooms were empty, including the fourth one on the right. With Fu Mingxuan's cultivation, his senses encompassed a wide radius. His initial sweep had revealed nothing unusual. But since Qinjiang mentioned it, something must be there. Qinjiang held a high position in the Guanfeng pavilion, able to recognize many unusual individuals. He must have spotted someone who shouldn't be there. For Ming's mind, his consciousness scanning again, the entire third floor of the restaurant was devoid of customers. Even the waiters were absent. But having received the tip-off, he focused his attention and discovered the room wasn't empty. A formation designed to block sound and presence was active. This formation wasn't a high-level spell. It lacked the ability to conceal itself, more like a signpost indicating a desire for pride. It was sufficient for ordinary people. Unless a cultivator walked to the door, they wouldn't notice it from more than 10 meters away. The formation's characteristics were distinct. The user clearly hadn't attempted to conceal their identity. Fu Mingxuan's consciousness moved, knocking on the barrier. Consciousness responded, and upon contact, both immediately recognized each other's identity. The private room in this way station inn offered little beyond quietude. Its furnishings were simple to the point of sparseness. This room was no exception, its mud walls crudely coated with whitewash, devoid of any decoration. A large 8-person square table and matching armchair sat in the center of the room, imitations of the high-end Qingzhou Yotai style, though the wood used was far inferior. 4 young men and women occupied the room, all strikingly beautiful and possessing an indescribable air of refinement in their every movement. Their clothing and possessions were understated yet exquisite, immediately identifying them to a discerning eye as members of noble families. Their presence in this humble dwelling instantly evoked the image of Kui Pian Gb Shehav, adding luster to a humble abode. A young man sat at the head of the table, tall, handsome, broad-shouldered and with a naturally regal bearing. His composure was both assured and undeniable. It was the air of authority possessed only by those long accustomed to power and high office. He held a white porcelain teacup, yet never brought it to his lips. Since entering, he had spoken little, mostly listening to the conversations of his 3 junior disciples. Suddenly, he looked up and said, "We discovered. Let's go." 2 of his junior disciples, accustomed to unquestioning obedience, rose immediately without a word, the only female present. Also the youngest exclaimed in surprise. In this dilapidated place, someone could detect senior brother's talismans from a distance. The young man didn't reply, only asking, "Is it time?" A slender young man to his right responded respectfully, "The rendezvous point is at Xianying Bridge, southeast of Yujing City. If we leave now, we'll arrive precisely on time." Why did the Flower God Temple meeting have to be on a pleasure boat? It's all just common hussies. Are there any decent-looking women there? They actually treat that as their legitimate business. The girl clearly disapproved of their destination. Her pretty lips curved into a downward pout, her cheeks, still carrying a hint of baby fat, puffed out in a disgruntled expression. Her charming face like a half-open gardenia. The man on the left, quite lively, teased her. "Which one is it? What's the difference? The way of love is one of the 3,000 ways, clearly written in the Taoist scriptures." As they laughed and joked, they looked up to see the leading young man already leaving the room. They quickly followed. The tea stall remained quiet, with only Fu Mingxuan and the shopkeeper present. Fu Mingxuan sat at the table, eyes slightly lowered, as if lost in thought. He then snapped out a walk to the shopkeeper, and said, "Shopkeeper, I apologize for disrupting your business today. The few residents will compensate for all losses." The shopkeeper, unprepared for Fu Ming's courtesy, could no longer feign ignorance. He quickly jumped up and bowed, saying, "Master Fu, this small business is actually under the Golden Valley Garden. You have a long-standing friendship with Master Lu. If I dared take your money for this trivial matter, I wouldn't be able to explain myself back home." Fu Mingxuan showed a slight expression of surprise and smiled faintly. "So this place is under Golden Valley Garden? Then please give my regards to Luli and tell him I will visit him another day." The shopkeeper readily agreed, respectfully seeing Fu Mingxuan out. After straightening up, he couldn't help but rub his forehead and muttered to himself, "What's going on today? Could the capital be about to change?" A river of jade green water winds its way through the capital of Yu like a jade belt around a beauty's waist. This is an artificial waterway, built at the founding of the city. This canal, drawing water from the Great Waste River, serves as an important part of the city's protective array and also supplies the city's daily needs. The section of water around the Xianying Bridge in the southeast of the city is the widest, and the calm inner river is perfect for pleasure boats. Over the years, this area along with the surrounding districts has become a renowned pleasure quarter. Though called Xianying Bridge, it was more accurately a fixed jetty, 100 jiang long, elaborately decorated corridor extending from the shore. festooned with lanterns, winding its way along the water's edge. All the pleasure boats in the city arrived and departed from here at night. Even the air seemed thick with romance. This stretch of the embankment was unusually quiet during the day, a stark contrast to the bustling city streets on the other side of the complex, highlighting the serenity of this place that ran on a reversed day-night cycle. Sunlight glinted off the white stone pavement, casting a faint rainbow. Low, gently brushing against the embankment and the bridle path in the light breeze. The quiet was shattered by the sound of approaching hooves. A flash of crimson, like a cloud drifting across the sky, came to an abrupt halt at the entrance to the jetty. Yanmengji, truly a magnificent steed, stopped so swiftly yet effortlessly, extending its neck to let out a relaxed snort. The young man on its back remained unfazed by the sudden stop, his posture languid and careless, the reins loosely draped across his lap, as if he were sitting in his own hall. In mid-air his deep crimson robes billowed and then settled gently, like an inextinguishable flame. Kai Ting yawned slightly in response to Yanmengji's snort. The man and beast mirrored each other in that moment. Upon closer inspection, one would find that this notorious rake of Yujing was not unattractive. His features were refined, his contours strong and bold. However, a chronic air of sleepy indolence completely overshadowed any hint of elegance. His pale complexion and the dark circles under his eyes were most striking, lending credence to his reputation for excessive indulgence. Kai Ting lazily raised a hand, scratched the back of his neck, then looked towards the pontoon, momentarily startled, his expression darkening instantly. At this time, the group of blue-robed knights, his companions and attendants, also arrived in a great clamor. Seeing the empty pontoon, their faces shifted and changed, like a palette of mixed colors. A young man with a thin face shouted first, "What's going on? Where are the people from Yilanzhou?" A short man shrank his neck. "It passed the appointed time, impossible." The man called Brother Li Liang held a certain amount of status and prestige among Kai Ting's companions. He was the one who had arranged the meeting with the courtisan of Yilanzhou, and he was the most anxious about this mishap. After all, Kai Ting's ardent pursuit of Linxi, the celebrated courtisan of Yilanzhou, had become the talk of the town. Chapter Lalosan 4 Yilan on the Boat Part 1. Linxi was a renowned keen master who had risen to prominence in Xizhou in the last 2 years. She had only been in this city for 3 months, yet her unparalleled beauty and talent in literature and music had already made her a contender for the title of the most beautiful woman in Jade Capital. Sadly, beautiful women tend to be independent and unconventional, and this renowned courtesan was no exception. To board her flower boat, mere gold and jewels were insufficient. One also needed to possess literary talent and scholarly knowledge. Literary talent aside, throughout the 9 continents, the southern regions were renowned for their flourishing literary culture, while the north lagged behind. Even Jade Capital didn't boast many accomplished scholars and literati. As for scholarly knowledge, it was something every cultivator had to learn upon entering the path of cultivation, the foundation of the way of the Tao. Of course, to discuss the Tao with a beauty, mere rudimentary knowledge is insufficient, logically speaking. As a cultivator at the upper master realm, even at the initial stage of detachment, should have a basic grasp of the Tao and be more than capable compared to ordinary cultivators. However, many know that Kai Ting might be one of the few upper master realm cultivators who haven't yet grasped his own divine abilities. Kai Ting possessed innate divine strength. At 8 years old, he could rival a battle cultivator who had trained for 30 years in terms of strength. As a descendant of the Yan clan, he also had an exceptional affinity with the Taichu hammer, the spiritual weapon and treasure of the family. At 15, during an accident, the Taichu hammer became his innate weapon, and he thus entered the upper master realm. All weapons that reach the spiritual weapon level possess their own divine abilities. Is a divine ability inherent to the Taichu hammer, and a supremely powerful one at that. Kai Ting's experiences give off a singular impression. Good fortune trumps high aptitude, and innate talent is less important than favorable circumstances. Countless upper masters, even true immortals, struggle to find a suitable innate weapon, let alone the arduous and lengthy process of refinement and nurturing. And, disregarding his cultivation level, directly forged a bond with a spiritual weapon, effortlessly leaping over a path that would take others decades and countless hardships. Even if he had a reputation for being unscholarly and utterly clueless about Taoist comprehension, so what? Possessing the Taichu hammer, Kai Ting's innate strength was further amplified. His strength alone was something ordinary cultivators could not withstand. His divine ability, regardless of its origin, firmly placed him at the threshold of the upper master realm. In Jade Capital, he was only slightly inferior to a few core disciples of prominent sects and some seasoned elders. However, what was originally not a problem became a problem in the presence of a beauty. Asking Kai Ting to discuss the Tao is akin to tasking an illiterate person with composing an elegant and evocative poem, a cruel predicament. Since Linxi's first public appearance at a banquet in Jade Capital, Kai Ting has received countless rebuffs from her. Even at public gatherings, the beauty showed him no favor. The master had a problem, and it was the attendant's duty to help. Li Liang, adept at maneuvering, had been running around day and night, finally securing this opportunity. It was said to be a private gathering at Linxis, so an extra guest wouldn't be unwelcome. After all, Kai Ting was known for his generous hospitality. The Linxi family viewed gold and jade as dirt, but those running the pleasure boats couldn't survive on air. Besides, Kai Ting was the legitimate master of the artisan manor, unlike those powerless signs of noble families in Yujing's territory. It wasn't wise to offend him too much yet. At the last minute, a mishap occurred. Sweat beaded on Li Liang's forehead. He checked the timer. They arrived precisely on time. If the people from the Yilan boat had already been there and left without seeing anyone, it would be a grave injustice. Yan Kai-ting had rushed back from a neighboring city today, traversing the vast, beast-infested wilderness beyond the city's protective array. Although their party were skilled fighters and not worried about traveling safety, encountering beasts would still cause delays. Such was the case today. They encountered a small pack of ferocious burrowing rabbits, costing them some precious time. Just as Li Liang was about to send someone to scout, a derisive laugh echoed from somewhere nearby. Though brimming with blatant mockery, the laughter was undeniably melodious and charming. The lingering note, like a clear spring cascading into a still pool, possessed a breathtaking resonance, inspiring the listener to imagine how intoxicating the voice's owner would sound in normal conversation. Li Liang, who had been on the verge of a furious outburst, instantly cowered upon seeing who it was. From the lush canopy of an old banyan tree nearby, a young woman gracefully leaped down, her emerald green dress seeming to have materialized from the vibrant foliage itself. Like a sprite born from the trees, the girl's bright eyes, like autumn water, were captivating. Her slender waist, barely a handspan around, held a sword whose hilt gleamed with a rich, ethereal light. The stark contrast between the lethal sharpness of the weapon and the delicate softness of her waist created a breathtaking beauty. The girl mocked, waiting for Yilan's boat. "Don't bother, I've already sent them away." Yan Kai-ting glanced at her lazily.
"Hey, Fu Mingyuan.
"I remember you're only 18. Why do you act like an old maid, always spoiling other people's good time?" A blush of anger colored Mingyuan's face, yet it owning a touch of dazzling allure. "Yan Kai-ting, have some dignity. You act all high and mighty, but you're nothing but a performer." Yan Kai-ting cut her off, listlessly. "Fu Mingyuan, you're starting to sound like my mother." Fu Mingyuan's chest rose and fell as she took a deep breath, her hand resting on her sword hilt. Before Yan Kai-ting could react, his attendants and followers instinctively took a step back, Lang especially recoiling with evident apprehension. This second daughter of the Fu family and Yan Kai-ting had been sworn enemies since childhood, their encounters invariably erupting into conflict within moments. Both were at the peak of their cultivation, Yan Kai-ting with powerful divine art, Fu Mingyuan with solid sword and talisman techniques. A fight was pointless as neither would kill the other. But while Fu Mingyuan couldn't defeat Yan Kai-ting, venting her frustration on his attendants was perfectly acceptable. Even if some had higher cultivation than her, would they dare retaliate? So, again, fighting was pointless. As another inevitable confrontation loomed, someone among the attendants mumbled, "Hey, the boat's here." Following the sound, they saw a boat, its pavilion shaped like a blooming orchid, sailing swiftly across the wide river, nearing the shore in moments. Only then did everyone realize a group of people, 3 men and a woman, all impeccably dressed and adorned with extraordinary weapons and artifacts, had appeared nearby at some point. Fu Mingyuan's face darkened. She was unhappy about how much of the recent commotion those outsiders might have witnessed. Except for a very young girl whose eyes, when glancing at Yan Kai-ting, revealed a subtle hint of disdain, the 3 young men remained impassive. The tall man leading the group even offered a slight nod in acknowledgement upon making eye contact, leaving Fu Mingyuan without grounds for a confrontation. After the Yilan boat docked, it became clear that its return journey was solely to pick up those foreigners. The Yilan's attendant also saw Yan Kai-ting and his group, his face immediately turning awkward. Chapter 005 The Yilan Boat Part 2. Ignoring Fu Mingyuan's watchful glare, Li Liang strode towards them. He knew he could shout in public, so he pulled the attendant aside for a whispered conversation. After a long whispered exchange, the attendant, seeing that the honored guest had been on board for a while and still being held back by Li Liang, grew anxious. "Brother Li," he urged, "your master is certainly a VIP, but we can't afford to offend the Fu family's lady either." The reason was simple. While Yan Kai-ting was notoriously ill-tempered, he would at least make an effort to be well-behaved in front of the woman he was pursuing. Lady Fu, usually composed and elegant, was known alongside Tu Yurong, the third lady of the Tu family, as one of the twin beauties of Yujing. However, when angered, few in Yujing City could afford to ignore her wrath. Li Liang glanced sideways at the attendant. Logic that true, but the fact that Yilan Zhou dared to cancel so decisively still has something to do with Lin Shi's dislike of the Yan family patriarch. Before they could continue their argument, a flash of red, followed by a streak of green. The attendant looked closely and was instantly filled with despair. Yan Kai-ting, clearly impatient, bypassed the gangplank, leaping directly across the water onto the deck, with Fu Mingyuan close behind, with them already aboard. Who dared to openly turn them away? The attendant steeled his heart, abandoning Li Liang, and raced back to the Yilan Zhou, ordering the boat to depart. What did it matter? The sky wouldn't fall. There were people on board more important than him. The Yilan Zhou was a 3-story structure, spacious and grand. The first floor was a single, open hall with floor-to-ceiling windows all thrown open. Sheer white curtains, translucent and ethereal, billowed in the breeze, dancing alongside the graceful movements of the dancers within. Yan Kai-ting stood at the entrance, surveying the hall before stepping inside. The hostess of the Yilan Zhou was a woman of lingering charm, descending from the second floor. Her expression subtly stiffened upon seeing Yan Kai-ting, and when she saw Fu Mingyuan behind him, her composure completely crumbled, her smile freezing on her face. Before Yan Kai-ting could speak, Fu Mingyuan said coldly, "What? The Yilan Zhou has quite a reputation now. Are we no longer welcome here?" The Grand Hall was clearly hosting a scattered immortals gathering, a recently popular social event with no fixed theme. Attendees could freely participate in various activities within the same space, catering to diverse interests. This flexible format satisfied social needs while avoiding boredom for those who might not be skilled or interested in any particular activity. The people present were engaged in several activities, creating a lively yet uncrowded atmosphere where everyone was undisturbed. Some were watching a dance performance, others were participating in a literary gathering or engaging in conversation, and a few were even playing chess. When Yan Kai-ting and Fu Mingyuan entered, they didn't attract much attention. Only a few people glanced their way, and none approached to greet them. This was largely because most of those present were not from Yujing and didn't recognize Yan and Fu. While a few of those who glanced at them were locals, they had no prior acquaintance with the two families. Yan Kai-ting and Fu Mingyuan found the faces vaguely familiar, but they were completely unaware of their names or affiliations. Fearing to offend these two influential figures, chuckled and prepared to summon someone to show them to their seats. "No need to rush," Yan Kai-ting said. "Where is Miss Lingxi?" Loja pointed towards a corner screen by a curtain. "Miss Lingxi just finished playing a piece and is now resting. She'll be hosting a literary gathering later. Would you mind if we place your seats over there?" Unexpectedly refusing. "A crude person like myself shouldn't intrude. Miss Lingxi is likely a renowned scholar invited from elsewhere. Let's not disturb her." Leju was about to offer further apologies when a figure emerged from behind the curtain, the young man who had earlier turned back to greet the four, the leader of the group. Behind him, Lingxi revealed half her face, a vision of orchid light. Clearly having risen to see them off, a gesture no one had received since her rise to fame in Yujing, Luja was immediately embarrassed. Judging by her expression, she hadn't expected Lingxi to be alone with a guest in this setting otherwise. Lu Zhou would never have pointed out Lingxi's location. Yan Kai-ting didn't give it a second glance, turning to address Mingyuan instead. "Second miss, come here a moment." He walked towards a deserted window. Fu Mingyuan was about to speak, but Yan Kai-ting cut her off. Hesitating slightly, she followed him. Seeing the two of them looking as if they had something to say, Zhou quickly stepped back a few paces. Before she had fully turned away, a sudden change occurred by the window. Fu Mingyuan's body suddenly flew through the window, soaring far away before landing with a splash in the water. Yan Kai-ting had scooped her up and thrown her. The event was so sudden, and Yan Kai-ting leveraged their natural difference in size and strength, that Fu Mingyuan was completely helpless. Lo Zhu cried out in surprise, lifting her skirt and rushing to the window to look down. If anything happened to this pampered young lady of the Fu family, regardless of the culprit, she would be in serious trouble. Fu Mingyuan of course could possibly drown. She only got her skirt and stockings wet before rising from the water, but she couldn't use levitation magic in the city, only relying on her light body skill to barely stay afloat. Fu Mingyuan roared angrily. Her current position was quite close to the shore, some distance from the boat, rendering her shout completely lacking in force across such a distance. Yan Kai-ting laughed heartily, unfastening his crimson robe and throwing it out, neatly wrapping around Fu Mingyuan's wet body and the remainder of her curses. "Go home, this isn't a place for you to play." Under Yan Kai-ting's outer robe was a deep purple and crimson garment, the colors incredibly rich and intense. Together, they were almost jarring, the excessively bright clothing threatening to overwhelm the wearer. But this wasn't the case with Yan Kai-ting. The deep crimson and purple highlighted his pale, almost sickly complexion, lending him a touch of ferocity. If his demeanor hadn't been so languid, almost listless, it might have even conveyed some of the imposing presence befitting his status. Lo Zhu finally let out a long sigh, clutching the window frame with one hand and patting her heaving chest with the other. Half scaff reproachful, "Master Yan, you were so reckless!" "That was the Madame Fu." Yan Kai-ting surveyed the hall, giving a meaningful smile. "I sent her away," he said. "You should be thanking me." A fleeting subtlety crossed Oja's face. For a moment, she couldn't tell if he meant something more, or if he was just speaking casual. Having seen many people in her time, she quickly responded with a flurry of affirmations. Yes, thank you, Master Yan. "I'll arrange a seat for you right away," Yan Kai-ting said. "No need, I'll sit there." He pointed to the table where the young man had been sitting moments before. Without another word to Lu Zhou, he strode towards it. Lu Zhou felt molly locked. Staring at the young man, he glanced back at her seemingly casually, and her tense expression relaxed. That table was ideally located at the back of the hall. On one side stood a gilded pillar that reached the ceiling, providing a natural separation from the other seating areas. Facing the passageway, half a carved screen stood, elegant and secluded. Yan Kai-ting stood before the table of four, saying, "Mind if I join you?" Though phrased as a question, it carried the weight of a statement. The pretty girl was the first to react, a sharp no, escaping her lips before the young man at the head of the table cut her off. "Please," the young man said, gesturing with a raised hand. The slender man seated opposite the young man stood, offering his seat to Yan Kai-ting. He then moved to sit beside the other man. Yan Kai-ting sat down heavily, with the air of an unwelcome guest. His right hand rested on the table, a flash of cold light, and a large hammer was causing the tabletop to sink slightly. Chapter 6 Li Jui Lan Part 2. This was an unusual weapon. The handle was short, perfect for a firm grip, but the head was exceptionally large, nearly the size of two human heads, shaped like a lotus bud about to bloom. An aura of ancient simplicity emanated from it. Gazing at the etched markings for a prolonged period induced a churning in the mind, a sense of profound mystery where each line held endless meaning. The three at the table paled. Yan Kai-ting's action was a blatant provocation, yet something was amiss. The table seemed to have inexplicably lowered. Suddenly alert, the three looked down. They saw that the four legs of the large sandalwood table had sunk several inches into the floor. Strangely, the tabletop remained perfectly level, without a single crack. The sheer weight of the hammer spoke volumes, as did the exquisite skill of its wielder in controlling his key. The girl abruptly looked up, her gaze at Kai Ting intensely hostile. She reached up to touch her temples, a hairpin neither gold nor jade, flashing a streak of blue light from its head clearly. It was an activated magical artifact. The other two young men looked at their senior brother in unison, awaiting his signal before teaching this frog from a shallow well in the mortal city a lesson. They were all prodigies within their sect, not the type to swallow their pride. While this display showed the fop before them wasn't entirely useless, it was hardly anything to them. The leading young man, however, showed no sign of displeasure. Instead, he slowly broke into a smile introducing himself. "My name is Xuanhuan of Jing siblings." A moment of silence, the atmosphere was taut. Kai Ting's face suddenly displayed a series of lively expressions: enlightenment, admiration, overly enthusiastic warmth as he said earnestly, "I am Kai Ting of the Tingo workshop in Yongzhou. Brother Shen's reputation precedes him meeting you today. Your bearing truly surpasses the mundane." Yet, despite the lively words, his shifting, slightly bewildered gaze betrayed that he probably had no idea who Xuanhuan was. The other three at the table were speechless for a moment. When had they ever seen such a shameless character, changing faces like turning pages? One moment looking like he was about to fight, the next assuming a posture of eager camaraderie. If it weren't for the hammer still arrogantly dominating half the table, they might have thought the provocation was an illusion. Xuanhuan glanced at his junior siblings. The three of them managed to compose themselves and introduce themselves as well. The slender and more composed one was Xuanhuan, the lively one was Haolingyan, and the girl, though clearly reluctant, dared not openly object to Xuanhuan's authority, finally uttering the name Xiaominghua. Thus a confrontation poised for drawn swords dissolved into a chance encounter, for Xu Yishan, Haolingyan, and Xiaominghua. This sudden turn of events was inexplicable and infuriating. In fact, they hadn't noticed that the moment the hammer slammed on the table, Kai Ting's momentum had solidified, like a waterfall frozen mid-air on a glacier. Even now, a trace of that weighty force remained, imperfectly concealed. Though Kai Ting's previous move had been quite skillful, combining power and control, he knew in his heart that the outcome should not have been this. Tai Chus Wei, even without a mountain, was equivalent to a magnificent high-rise building. With his control technique, the table wouldn't crack, nor would it be crushed. However, barring any unforeseen circumstance, all four table legs should have been embedded into the floor, rather than just partially sunk as they were. The unforeseen circumstance lay with the young man. Yet from beginning to end, the man hadn't made any obvious movement. He simply adjusted his posture naturally, his elbow lightly resting on the table's edge, silently neutralizing the immense downward force. Moreover, it seemed even his junior disciples had noticed. What level of mastery was this? Among those present, most harbored hidden currents of emotion. Only Xuanhuan appeared completely at ease. He casually observed the hammer for a moment, then said, "This is Tai Chu, the weaponry codex states before chaos, the beginning of primordial energy. Heaven and earth revolve on stars, a magnificent weapon." Kai Ting clapped his hands. "Brother Shen, you are indeed formidable. I am no match for you. I withdraw from the contention for Lingxi." By this time, Kai Ting's arrogance had completely vanished. His swagger was gone, replaced by listlessness. His once straight back slumped, his posture reverting to its usual languid state. It must be said, his current demeanor and attitude could only be described as childish. Even Xuanhuan was momentarily stunned, realizing he had just been treated to a display of childish jealousy. Meanwhile, Xiaominghua and the others received another shock. They couldn't imagine that Xuanhuan, such a refined and illustrious figure in their eyes, was being fought over. The girl couldn't stand it. Her eyes widened, her initial faint disdain morphing into intense disgust. She was about to blurt out something unpleasant. Xuanhuan chuckled smoothly. "I'm not interested in Lingxi, if you like her so much." At that moment a resonant, sharp sound of a gokeen pierced the air, capturing the attention of most in the hall. Many people put down their tasks and gathered towards the east side. It turned out that Lingxi and her companions had emerged from their temporary resting place. For some reason, the planned literary gathering had commenced. Instead, she had begun playing the gokeen. Naturally, no one objected. Lingxi's gokeen skills were unparalleled, a rare treat, and to have this opportunity today was cause for celebration. Kai Ting's attention was also completely drawn away. He forgot to even greet Xuanhuan, pushing back his chair and walking towards the sound. He didn't approach too closely, stopping at the outer edge, quietly listening. The resonant notes of the gokeen lingered, weaving through the hall with the gentle breeze. But not everyone was captivated by the music. Xiaominghua showed little interest. She could hold it in no longer. "Master brother is far too polite to that uncouth boy." She glared at the large hammer left carelessly on the table by its owner, a hint of suspicion in her eyes. "This Tai Chu hammer, I seem to recall the weaponry codex listing it as merely a spirit weapon. Shenbo Yanse Chu, with its inherent 3000 jun of force, already ranks among the top-tier spirit weapon." Hearing this number, the three at the table were all somewhat moved. "Such a weathercock, a bully who's afraid of stronger opponents, only has brute strength to rely on," Shenbo Yan said. "Tai Chu has now transcended the realm of spirit weapons. It is, without a doubt, an immortal weapon." Haolingyan, seated to the side, instantly lit up. The war weapon he cultivated was also of the heavy combat type. Shenbo Yan, seemingly reading his thoughts, finished the sentence. because it has already bonded with its master to become a life-bound weapon. The excitement on Hao Ling Yun's face instantly faded. Xuanhuan muttered under her breath, weapons can level up when they become life-bound. The elders of the 100 Weapons Hall never mentioned that! Still, what's so great about it? He's still just a lecherous coward? Of course, not all weapons level up, in fact. Such a situation is extremely rare, which is why the 100 Weapons Hall didn't include it in the common knowledge. Shen Boyan answered the first half of Xiao Minghua's question, concerning the serious business of cultivation. He still frequently guided his junior brothers and sisters, then turned his head to glance at Kai Ting. The hall was filled with guests. That purple-clad figure stood a step away from the crowd, somehow exuding an aura of lonely detachment. Shen Boyan said, Fu Hanzhou's childhood friend, quite an interesting person indeed. His 3 junior siblings looked at each other. These arrogant, spineless wastrels who cower at the slightest setback exist everywhere. What's so interesting about them? Lynch's keen music reached its conclusion, and the audience was immersed in the imagery of apricot blossoms falling like rain. The piece harmonized perfectly with the late spring season, captivating the listeners and transporting them to a valley of flowers. At that moment, a flute's note suddenly pierced the air from beyond, like a sword cleaving through the gentle keen music, tearing through the spring water. Instantly, a syllable of the keen music was lost to the audience, completely overwhelmed by the flute. Chapter 09 Ages of Time, and the keen music reappeared, its rhythm and imagery unchanged, until its perfect ending. Lynch's skill in playing the keen was truly remarkable. Even in such a sudden interruption, she wasn't thrown off by the disruptive flute, truly deserving the title of master. However, while professional jealousy is inevitable, such blatant disruption is rare. A shard guest by the window exclaimed, "The two family. That's the two family's gilded bark!" The two family, also known as half the city of Jade in Yujing, is one of the oldest families in the city, having established their roots long before the city reached its zenith and decline. When the jade veins dried up and most clans and families withdrew, the two family did not leave. Instead, they underwent a difficult transformation, struggling to survive alongside the city, eventually rising from an obscure little family to the behemoth it is today. As time flowed and the stars shid, countless families and powers rose and fell in Yujing. Whether it was the current 4 great families or the 5 great sects of years past, only the two family remained unshaken. For the past century, they have held the position of city lord for 5 consecutive generations. Since it's called a barge, the gilded barge is more than twice the size of the Yilan Zhou, also a 3-story structure, but far grander and more magnificent. From the deck of the gilded barge, the view is entirely from above. The two vessels were now dangerously close. The gilded barge is brown, gold-trimmed hull nearly filling the Yilan Zhou's right side window. A group of people stood on the gilded barge's side, the most striking of whom was a young man surrounded by others. This man was about Kai Ting's age, strong and sturdy, with a pair of spirited eyes beneath thick, dark brows, dressed in a black warrior's uniform with a brocade robe over it. He stood out amongst the attendants and the yin beautiful women with an extraordinary bearing. This was Tu Yuyong, the second son of the two family, one of Yujing's 4 young masters. Kai Ting, come out! Before Tu Yuyong could speak again, before the terrified Loju could reach Kai Ting, he had vanished from his spot. A streak of pale purple light shot through the Yilan Zhou's front hall, spiraled once on the bow deck, and then soared into the sky. The transient nature of the world. The passage of Sen's divine technique is quite interesting indeed. Hao Ling Yun's face showed surprise, his eyes turning serious. Kai Ting's display of skill instantly dispelled his earlier contempt. Kai Ting's speed was so, his movement a blur, yet he passed through the densely packed seats and crowd without disturbing a single speck of dust. Hao Ling Yun, seated several yards away, didn't sense the slightest fluctuation of energy. This wasn't achievable through mere lightness techniques, but rather the manifestation of the mystical art of traversing the ages, a profound mastery of walking techniques. In other words, if the rumors are true and Kai Ting's power is merely external, it's even more terrifying how extraordinarily gifted must he be to seamlessly integrate divine power and technique without effort. Xiao Minghua beside him looked puzzled, her small face creased in thought, her delicate brows drawn together in a tight frown. Staring at the Taichu hammer still lying quietly on the table before her, she finally pointed at it and said, "Did he forget it? Does anyone casually toss aside their own life-bound weapon?" Only after the flowing light on the deck completely vanished did the crowd in the hall react. Some looked bewildered and exchanged whispers, others murmured conspiratorially as if sharing a secret, while others quickly rushed to the deck and looked up. After surging to a certain height in the air, the streak of light abruptly changed direction, striking the luxurious golden boat like an arrow. If the observers possessed keen enough eyesight, they would have seen Kai Ting's figure stretching into several overlapping shadows, each a perfect imitation of the same action, his right fist raised, elbow tucked close to his ribs, pausing slightly before striking forward. Most hadn't expected Kai Ting's response to be so swift and violent, forgoing even pleasantries and attacking immediately. The deck of the golden boat instantly erupted into chaos. Tu Yuyong, however, showed no surprise. With a flick of his wrist, a flash of snowy light leapt from its sheath, the chilling blade aura cutting through the air, forcing the slightly scattered crowd to retreat. He sprang up, his blade describing a flourish in the air. The move seemed ordinary, yet bluish light flickered around him, tracing the arc of what looked like a dome-shaped shield. The counter-attack, a move known as geese falling to flat sands, was perfectly timed. Kai Ting charged forward, fist already extended. The luminescence around Yan Kai had faded to near invisibility, yet his afterimages persisted. Strangely, though each punch was an identical, straightforward strike, their points of impact seemed to converge on a single point. If this wasn't merely an illusion, then one punch had become many. Striking simultaneously, boom, his fist struck the energy shield, sending countless streams of Kai flying outward in a chaotic spray. The crowd on the deck of the Xuanhuan were the first to bear the brunt. Tossed about like ragdolls in a gale, screams mingled with the sound of splashes as two unlucky individuals were swept overboard. Neither of the two instigators fared any better. Tu Yuyong, positioned slightly downwind, was knocked off the deck, but how could such tremendous force be easily dispelled? A simple fall would have been harmless for him, but the impact would have shattered the deck, possibly even piercing the multiple levels of the ship below. Cherishing his own vessel, Tu Yuyong used all his agility to adjust his position before landing, his back slamming into a section of railing. The finest, hardest wood couldn't withstand the impact. It shattered instantly, plunging into the water. This slight resistance, however, allowed Tu Yuyong to successfully cushion his fall. He spun several times on the spot, his feet never touching the ground, before finally expending all remaining momentum. Yan Kai-ting's situation was even worse. Suspended in mid-air, with no purchase, had thrown a punch lacking the leverage of a wet, and it was like he'd simply collided with his opponent. The impact sent him flying, and for a moment he could find anywhere to land. Tu Yuyong finally found his footing, surveying the others on deck. The scene was chaotic, but nothing serious. Those who'd fallen overboard had been rescued, and those who'd fallen were helping each other up. He and Yan Kai-ting were old rivals, having fought countless times. He couldn't understand what had gotten into the other man this time. They'd skipped the prelude entirely and gone straight to blows. But since Yan Kai-ting hadn't used a weapon, Tu Yuyong didn't stoop to taking advantage, and he held back. Their clash was purely a test of strength without any destructive maneuvers. Out of sight of the others, Tu Yuyong hissed, subtly rotating his shoulder to ease the stabbing pain, and cursed under his breath. That damn kid, he seemed to have gotten even stronger. With that thought, Tu Yuyong looked for Yan Kai-ting, his eyes widening in shock. Yan Da, he shouted. A dark figure, swift as a falling meteor, plummeted from the sky, smashing into the Xuanhuan's sail, tearing a human-shaped rip in the multi-storied silk brocade. The figure stuck to the sail for a moment, then slid down several feet before finally regaining his balance. It was none other than Yan Kai-ting. Heaven knew how, with no support, he'd managed to adjust his trajectory mid-air to hit the sail at such an awkward angle. Tu Yuyong, he didn't believe for a moment that Yan Kai-ting had deliberately damaged the Xuanhuan's unique sail. After all, such a massive piece of silk brocade could only be custom-made, requiring at least 3 months of work by 20 skilled women working day and night. Yan Kai-ting landed lightly in front of him, saying nonchalantly, "My mood's improved now, so I'll compensate you. In a couple of days is the demon time, kill a few more demons." Tu Yuyong was even angrier. Forgetting he still held his unsheathed sword, he waved a hand. "Will I kill fewer than you? I don't need your bounty." His sword was a spirit weapon, a third narrower than usual, but a third long, forged with a fragment of spirit essence from the depths of the Fuyu mountain range in the far north, named Bingxuan. Therefore it didn't need activation, simply drawing it made the surrounding air incredibly cold. Such a spirit weapon had considerable killing power. Yan Kai-ting didn't dare let it get close. Seeing the snow-white blade slicing towards his nose, he immediately leaned back to avoid it. Tu Yuyong only then realized it. He sheathed his sword with a humph, but didn't let up verbally. "No need for such a grand bow," Yan Kai-ting scoffed, straightening up to speak. Suddenly, they both stopped, listening intently. A pecking sound came from beneath their feet. The sound of countless timbers breaking. Chapter 1008. The culprit. The change came swiftly. Before anyone could react, the enormous pleasure boat splintered apart with a deafening crash. The crack started near the middle of the top deck and ran down through 3 levels, like an invisible hand splitting the vessel in 2. Yan Kai-ting and Tu Yuyong exchanged a look, seeing the same surprise and bewilderment mirrored in each other's eyes. A sharp cry rang out. "Yan Kai-ting, you've gone too far." Instantly a white figure shot out from a lower cabin, soaring through the air towards Yan Kai-ting. 2 willow leaf-shaped daggers flashed down, their tips spitting 8-inch-long blades of green energy. Yan Kai-ting, his gaze still lingering on Tu Yuyong's face, suddenly turned icy and sharp, piercing Tu Yuyong's heart and slowing his reaction. He could only watch helplessly as his third sister came dangerously close to slicing into Yan Kai-ting's right shoulder. Yan Kai-ting spun around like a whirlwind, simultaneously raising his right arm and delivering a powerful punch. Clang! A flash of light. The blade slicing through the air met the punch. The blow created 2 afterimages, striking both blades with pinpoint accuracy. Though flesh met steel, the sound was that of metal clashing against metal. Tu Yuyong stumbled back. Despite this, her skill was undeniable. Her slender figure, clad in a white martial arts uniform, moved with grace, shifting angles and taking small steps backward, attempting to dissipate the force of the blow. Yan Kai-ting's punch carried lingering force, sending Tu Yuyong reeling back 5 or 6 steps before regaining his balance. Tu Yang, standing nearby, couldn't just watch. He rushed between the two, his hand intercepting Yan Kai-ting's arm. Even so, his upper body swayed before he fully dissipated the powerful blow. Before Tu Yang could question him, Tu Yuyong raised his twin blades again, pointing them at Yan Kai-ting. "Yan," he cried, indignation filling his voice. "You attacked in broad daylight. Do you think our 2 family is easy to bully? Think again. One immortal weapon is enough to make you so arrogant. This was a direct accusation. Kai Ting was the culprit behind the destruction of the Golden Pavilion. You're wrong. What are you saying? His gaze swept across the shattered hull, his brow furrowing. The fracture was far more extensive than he expected. It was clearly caused by a blunt object, not a sharp weapon, and certainly not due to a faulty beam in the ship's structure. On the lower deck's cross-section, there were faint traces of scorching thin, irregular lines clustered in groups of 3 or 5. Seeing this, Tu Ying's heart. These were the marks of a lightning strike. Had Tu Ying not just fought Kai Ting and known firsthand that he hadn't used any spells aside from incorporating his spiritual energy into his light body movements, he might have also concluded that the pavilion was struck by a Taichuma. Tu Yurong, having been rebuked, stubbornly refused to comply. He turned his back to Tu Ying, waving his twin blades at Kai Ting. Got the guts to do it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even in the same city, no one dared to act so brazenly. If even the city lord of Lion doesn't matter to them, what are we, the common people, but weeds? They smashed the two families' boat without a second thought. In ancient times there were monsters in the mountains. Today, there's a great calamity in Yujing. Who knows who will be the next victim? Arrogant, famous soldiers and bright pearls cast into dark. A cacophony of voices arose, mingled with the sounds of splashing water and the groaning of the ship as it came apart. Eventually it became impossible to discern what anyone was saying. Meanwhile, the Shojin Fang, its hull broken, slowly listed to either side, gradually sinking. The section with the sails was less stable, judging by its angle. It would likely capsize upon hitting the water. At this moment, the two families' retainers and servants displayed the calm efficiency of a noble household. Once the initial chaos subsided, two captains immediately worked together to cut away the sails, slowing the ship's tilt. The remaining men, working in groups of 3, moved from the bottom of the ship upwards, searching layer by layer and gathering the passengers and sailors onto the deck. The Shojin Fang was a massive vessel. It would take some time to fully sink, enough time, hopefully, to launch lifeboats and evacuate everyone. Fortunately, Tu Yuyong had essentially chartered the Shojin Fang for the day. The passengers were siblings, friends and hangers-on, far fewer than when the ship was used for business. Most of them also possessed decent cultivation, so while frightened, none were in mortal danger. At worst, they might suffer minor injuries. Meanwhile, the Yilan Zhou, equally startled, could not stand idly by despite fright. Sailors were already running to the ship's edge to lower lifelines. Amidst the clamor, Kai Ting's purple robe under the bright but tepid afternoon sun was like a dark, intense stroke on a canvas, a color so vibrant as to be almost blinding. Yet imbued with a chilling coldness, it commanded attention. Yet one longed to avert their gaze immediately. Like those gathered on the wreckage of the Xiaojinfeng, or even on the Weilan Zhou, every eye was filled with fear, every eye with hostility. This corner of the Wei Dielzhou was perhaps the only quiet place. The guests in the hall, locals and outlanders alike, were all discussing the same topic. They either recounted, again and again, the past deeds of the too young, undeserving master of the artisan's manor, or else they voiced their indignant condemnation of today's brazen act of violence. Perhaps she had witnessed too much upheaval today. Xiao Minghua's bright eyes were somewhat vacant, her mind a tangle. She hesitated before speaking. If I'm not mistaken, she said, they're all saying that young Yan, to defend a woman on this boat named Lingxi, unable to defeat someone from the Tu family, actually used enchanted weapons to sink their ship. Hao Minghua replied, his face stiff. Then what's this? Could it be fake? Xiao Minghua stared at the unmoving Tai Chu hammer on the table, her gaze unfocused. Or did that kid split a 3-story ship with his bare hands? That of course is impossible. The standard unit of strength for ordinary cultivators is 100 jun. 1000 jun with bare hands is already a high-level battle cultivator between first rate and second rate. To split a 3-story building would require at least 3000 jun of force. If one's control over that force was equally strong, they could even sever a river. No one here is stupid. This is clearly a frame-up. It's due to the celestial soldier's carelessness or some other reason. The most important prop wasn't brought along. So to those of us who stumbled upon this scene, it's become a joke. However, the 4 of us came to this city to conceal our whereabouts. Might this Taichu hammer attract unwanted attention? Thinking further, why did the Flower God Temple choose the Yi Lanzhou for this meeting? And why did they use Linxi to receive Shen Boyan? Is this elaborate trap only targeting that eccentric wastrel, who had remained silent, was the first to grasp the situation? His face clouded with worry, he said, Senior brother. Shen Boyan stood up and said calmly, don't touch the Taichu hammer. Outsiders can't see it unless they approach the table. The 3 immediately understood that Shen Boyan had again deployed a concealment array. Before they could ask more, Shen Boyan simply dropped the words, wait for me, and his figure vanished from the spot, leaving only a wisp of grey smoke that flickered before dissipating completely. He had used a teleportation technique. This spell only allows for short-distance transportation. Almost instantly, Shen Boyan reappeared from a room on the upper right of the Yilan Zhou. The room was quite large, occupying half the space of the entire 3rd floor. It was divided into reception, changing, and rest areas by antique shelves and screens. The furnishings weren't the most expensive, but each piece was exquisitely crafted. A chaise lounge with a left-hand armrest was placed behind the screen. There were shadowy figures on it, as if someone was resting. Chapter 1009, a case of mistaking a deer for a horse. Shen Boyan made no sound, betraying no presence, yet the person behind the screen seemed utterly unconcerned by the sudden intrusion, showing no sign of alarm. With a gentle movement, The person raised an arm, the jade bracelets on the wrist tinkling delicately. They gracefully swung their legs off the bed and draped a silk garment over their shoulders. A graceful figure was cast upon the screen of woven sharkskin, swaying gently. As a faint fragrance drifted, a captivating face turned delicate as spun silk, conjuring an image of a misty, watery land steeped in perennial rain. Resting a hand on the frame of the golden Namu screen, she smiled faintly. Headmaster Shen, what brings you back? This beauty was Shen Boyan's contact, Qiani, the vice head of the flower god temple. Despite her delicate and alluring appearance resembling a young girl, she had been renowned for 30 years and was a highly influential figure in Geo. Shen Boyan's expression remained calm as he cut straight to the point. When you planted the evidence, didn't you check if Yan Kai Ting had Tai Chu with him? Qiani initially seemed to misunderstand Shen Boyan's meaning. She chuckled lightly. Whether he was the one who did it is irrelevant. What matters is that everyone present, seeing or believing what they saw, will unanimously confirm the same account. As she spoke, comprehension diminished. Without his soul weapon, the statement was baffling. Once a weapon was refined into a soul weapon, it became intrinsically linked to its owner, their fates intertwined. Usually kept within the consciousness sea for cultivation, they didn't even require things like mustard seed bags. How could someone not have their soul weapon with them? However, Qiani knew that Shen Boyan was not the type to make light-hearted jokes. At that moment, the space before her twisted, and a water mirror materialized about 4 or 5 feet above the ground, reflecting the very table where Shen Boyan sat. A faint, translucent light flowed slowly across the table's surface. Qiani focused on the outline, her expression freezing. It was a large hammer. Though she'd never seen the Tai Chu in person, she knew its features from the weaponry codex. Why was it there? Perhaps to show off a divine weapon to intimidate someone. And then forgotten on the table. Qiani's face took on an indescribable expression. Could anyone be that absurd? But regardless of how absurd it was, the Tai Chu hammer was undeniably on the table in the main hall downstairs, at least 2 ships away from Yan Kai Ting. Qiani's thoughts raced, then her expression softened, a smile returning to her face. Whether he did it or not was unimportant, as was whether others believed it. Absolute strength, dickhead. The arrival of Bloodspear Tanshanjing was imminent. The name Bloodspear Tanshanjing was infamous in the north. Legend had it he rose to power over 50 years ago as a Blackwater River pirate, graduating from robbery to protection rackets before establishing Yundu, a powerful escort service for merchant ships operating in the borderlands of Ayan Yongzhou. Shen Boyan suddenly understood a previous question. He had been puzzled logically. Ting to bizarrely leave behind his divine weapon. A normal trap would trigger after seeing him use the Tai Chu hammer. Otherwise, with so many eyes on board the Xiao Jin Fang and Yilan Zhou, it was impossible that every single person was pre-placed. Someone might have suspected something. Qiani's assertion that only absolute strength speaks the truth illuminated Shen Boyan. He realized that in this scheme, planting false evidence was merely the first step, success or failure. What followed was the strong imposing their will. In other words, the mastermind's objective wasn't to incite conflict between the Tu and Yan families, but something else entirely. Understanding this, Shen Boyan made a sweeping gesture in the air. The image in the water mirror shifted, showing Yan Kai Ting and the 2 siblings confronting each other on the golden boat. Tu Yurong was hopping mad. Tu Yurong's face, his arms crossed tight against his chest. Yan Kai Ting looked around, his gaze searching as if looking for something. Suddenly, Yan Kai Ting moved, leaping down into the broken section of the ship, quickly returning to the deck with a man in tow. The young man was dressed in refined clothes, but his face, swollen and bruised from at least a dozen slaps, was bloody and unrecognizable. Tu Yurong looked up, her face instantly paling. She shrieked, "Yan, what are you doing?" Yan Kai Ting tossed the man like a sack of potatoes, casually brushing dust from his clothes. "Disciplining my family. What's it to you?" Tu Yurong lunged forward, but a strong force stopped her in her tracks, turning in fury. She saw Tu Yurong holding her back. "Let go! Will you allow this thief to insult our family like this?" But Tu Yurong remained unmoved by her screams. He pointed to the young man cowering in the corner. "His name is Hu, has barely a distant cousin of Yem. What connection does he have to our Tu family?" Seeing that Tu Yurong was still making a fuss, Tu Yong said coldly, "Do you think him a fool, or do you think everyone present today is a fool? Stop meddling in Hu Donglei's affairs and think about how you're going to explain this to father when you get back." Tu Yurong suddenly fell silent. Her pretty face, in the silence, took on a somewhat sinister look. She said slowly, "Second, your reprimand is certainly not wrong, but you have no connection with Yan Kai Ting either. Why meddle in other people's business? Besides, young Master Hu and I are deeply in love, and father may not necessarily object." Tu Yong furrowed his brow. His hand relaxing, he said coldly, "Let's wait until you've spoken with father before we talk about whether he objects or not." Tu Yurong ran to Hu Donglei's side without looking back. At that moment, a long, piercing whistle, like the shattering of gold and stone, suddenly came from the Yilanzhou, causing the floor and walls of the entire boat to tremble slightly. Even the topmost room where Shen Boyan was located was not spared, with the porcelain on the table and the wall decorations clinking softly. Such an arrogant young man, facing disaster and still oblivious? This voice, like grinding sand, seemed as if each syllable might break at any moment, yet it was high-pitched, grating on the ears in an unbearable way. Several extremely swift figures flashed across the water mirror. 3 men and a woman appeared on the deck. Leading them was a tall, thin old man with high cheekbones and sharp eyes, his expression malevolent. It was Tan Shanjing of the Blood Spear. The other three were middle-aged, their bearing commanding, clearly no ordinary individuals. Tan Xianjing chuckled darkly, a heavy steel spear appearing in his hand. The spearhead glowed with a bloody light. Feeling strangely irritated, he swung the spear as if it weighed nothing, emitting a low, mournful sound as if the surrounding air had been instantly sucked dry. Kai Ting and Tu Yong were still several zhang away, yet their clothes fluttered without a breeze. This seemingly effortless spear swing from Tan Xianjing using no apparent supernatural techniques could actually cover such a vast range. Tu Yong's expression was extremely serious, all frivolousness gone. He took 2 steps towards Kai Ting, but immediately felt an invisible force in front of him, preventing him from taking a 3rd step. Kai Ting slowly straightened his back, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Tan Xianjing suddenly reached out into thin air, fire erupting from his finger, revealing a charred rectangular object resembling a message talisman. Tu Yong's face paled slightly. Though unfamiliar with Tan Xianjing, he sensed imminent danger and immediately sent out his family's emergency message talisman, only to have it intercepted with ease. This implied a chasm in their strengths, possibly an entire realm. Until I'm finished with my business, everyone better stay put, regardless of who you are. Tan Xianjing said this, his gaze fixed on Kai Ting like a predator eyeing its prey. He spoke in a chilling tone. I am Tan Xianjing, I ply the black waters, yet 3 days ago, my cargo was robbed. They dared to steal from right under my nose. I've been struggling to track down these cunning thieves, their methods unprecedented, capable of even severing a massive ship's connection. Today, however, my luck has turned. On the other side of the water mirror, Xuanhuan, having heard Tan Xianjing's words, understood the situation, by immediately bringing in a powerful figure like the ruthless and bloodthirsty Tan Xianjing, and using the pretext of stolen goods. He suspected this was likely an invasion by an outside force. Yujing City would likely be far from peaceful, and he hoped no local families would be foolish enough to invite the wolf into the fold and collude with the tiger. With his suspicions confirmed, Xuanhuan lost interest in watching further. Power struggles and the vying for dominance were commonplace in his life, and the petty squabbles of a city like Yujing held no interest for him. Xuanhuan made a sweeping gesture, and the water mirror's image shifted back to the original seating area in the lower hall. He sent out 3 thin beams of light. His junior disciples on the other side of the water mirror received the message, exchanged a glance, and then rose to leave. The faint, translucent glow on the table faded, revealing the simple and unadorned Tai Chu hammer. Shichuni suddenly felt something was amiss. She exclaimed urgently, Grandmaster Shen, what is the meaning of this? Xuanhuan offered a chilling smile. Is there anything else? Palace Master Shi. Simultaneously, all the restrictions around the Tai Chu hammer were lifted. The table, unable to withstand the sudden pressure, groaned under a grating, teeth-jarring crunch as its legs sank further into the floor, the whole thing beginning to descend. However, lacking sufficient counterbalancing force, the smooth descent was over. Less than halfway down, the table started to crack. Even in this quiet court, shielded from most eyes, the commotion was becoming too noticeable. Nearby guests were searching for the source of the noise, some already standing and peering around. If Shichuni still didn't understand Xuanhuan's displeasure, she was remarkably ignoring the impending catastrophe below. She rushed towards him, attempting to grasp his sleeve. This has nothing to do with me, Grandmaster Shen. It was merely a coincidence. Yun Duxing is a newly established alliance within the sect. We shouldn't refuse them the use of our premises. Xuanhuan subtly shifted, evading Shichuni's grasp. She missed, and looking up into his eyes, froze, unable to make any further movement. You're even more foolish than I thought, Xuanhuan said, his voice remarkably gentle. Sweat beaded on Shichuni's nose. Chapter Urutan blow of illusion and reality. Who put you up to this, to drag me down? Qiani's eyes, her mouth open closed, unable to speak. Given Xuanhuan's status, she dared not claim responsibility. Xuanhuan seemed to have known all along, and didn't press further, merely smiling. You outer disciples, you are Xuanhui sect's Depenuans, or any factions. If you want to form cliques, wait until you enter the inner sect. The current Flower God Palace dares to interfere in the conflict between direct disciples. Those words carried considerable weight. Xuanyi's face turned. Xuanhuan ignored her, putting away the water mirror and turning to leave. After opening the door, he paused, saying, since you used Lingxi to entertain me, I won't be polite about accepting him. Saichuni's mind was a complete mess. She couldn't utter a single word. By the time she looked up again, Xuanhuan was gone without a trace. In the lower hall, the Tai Chu hammer had completely crushed the sturdy sandalwood table, also grinding fine cracks into the wooden floor. People nearby peered over to see the utter devastation, and the impossibly large hammer amidst the pile of splintered wood. On the river outside, the remnants of the Shoxin barge were more than half submerged. However, most people had been evacuated to safety. The rest should escape soon. The confrontation continued on the other side, the 2 families' retainers and servants unaware that Tu Yuyong was also in danger. In their minds, Kai Ting was always causing trouble, while being accosted by people from the outer city was rare. It wasn't unheard of, and after Tu Yuyong's communication talisman was intercepted, he did expect those below to resolve the situation. Blood Spear, regardless of age or cultivation, was a powerhouse from his ancestral generation, looking across the entire Jade capital city. Apart from several top experts from the 4 great families, anyone else who stepped forward would simply be courting death. Tu Yuyong's assessment of the situation differed greatly from his sister's, whose judgment was clouded by infatuation. As a core member of the undisputed first family in Yujing City, while naturally rivals with other top families in the city, he harbored even greater hostility for outsiders like Xu Mao, who flaunted their power over the local forces. This was why, when the sudden upheaval occurred, Tu Yong's first reaction was to join forces with Kai Ting. Competition within the city involved both mutual destruction and mutual benefit. External defense, however, would only invite exploitation if fragmented. Unfortunately, many didn't understand this. Tu Yong only hoped his sister hadn't done anything too foolish. Tan Xiangying didn't even consider Tu Yong a threat. His focus was on completing the charade, apprehending his target, and escaping before the true powerhouses of Yujing City intervened. It wasn't that he couldn't win. It wasn't yet time for an all-out war. Tan Xiangying's eyes burned as he glared at Kai Ting. "Youngster, show me your divine weapon!" Kai Ting, with a mocking glint in his eyes, extended a hand. Palm up, a streak of purple lightning materialized in his palm, wriggling playfully, like a small fish in a clear stream, but it wasn't his innate weapon. Tan Xiangying was about to erupt in anger when he sensed something and turned his head towards Yi Lanzhou. At that moment, a faint light flickered across the surface of the Tai Chu hammer lying amidst the wood chips. It traced the hammer's intricate pattern. Growing brighter, and Tai Chu, like a tarnished pearl, was being polished layer by layer, finally revealing its splendor. Before the astonished gazes of many, the Tai Chu shot up with lightning speed, transforming into a streak of light that pierced through several layers of the Yi Lanzhou's ceiling, crossed over dozens of feet of water, and flew into Kai Ting's hand. Tan Xiangying's face darkened, as if about to drip with water by now. He couldn't fail to see the enormous flaw that had appeared in the seemingly airtight plot as it unfolded. Kai Ting said slowly, "Oh, I remember now. I left it on the Yi Lanzhou." With that, his long, powerful fingers tightened around the purple lightning-wreathed Tai Chu. Tan Xiangying sneered, "Good boy, you've got quite a few tricks up your sleeve, but they're nothing but a death throw." Before his words had even left his mouth, his heavy steel spear stabbed out, its force like a moving mountain. The spear tore through the air, a low, mournful whistle that was sharper and more chilling than Tan Xiangying's previous display of power. Those with less cultivation felt their ears tremble uncontrollably. Kai Ting stood directly in the path of the spear, feeling its earth-shattering power bearing down on him. It was as if a mountain was falling on his head. The air around him sucked dry. Freeling, with such a vast difference in cultivation, a head-on clash was impossible. In this situation, even dodging or deflecting the attack seemed almost impossible. Tu Yong's eyebrows jumped. Before he could react, the two men and one woman who had come with Tan Xiangying suddenly shifted positions, forming a strange, angled formation. They were perfectly positioned to block Tu Yong in the corner, and Li Hu Donglai's escape. The two men and one woman didn't attack, simply standing there impassively, yet they radiated a powerful aura, suggesting that anyone who crossed their line would immediately face a fierce assault. Kai Ting remained motionless, the purple lightning on the head of his Tai Chu flickering, appearing and disappearing endlessly. Some stray strands wrapped around his arms and spiraled upwards. Was he planning to block it? Did he realize that within the range of Tan Xiangying's heavy steel spear, escape was impossible, and this was a last-ditch effort? Tan Xiangying scoffed inwardly. He had heard that Kai Ting possessed godlike strength and a natural aptitude perfectly suited to the Tai Chu hammer, his style typically characterized by unrestrained power and aggressive combat. However, such tactics were utterly ineffective against him. A difference in realm was not something that mere brute strength could overcome. Then Kai Ting moved. His movements were subtle, almost imperceptible, a blur of motion within a minuscule space, creating so many afterimages that the viewer's vision became hazy. In this whirlwind of speed, the Tai Chu hammer, whose weight nearly pierced the Yi Lanzhou's floor, was as light as a feather in Kai Ting's hand, following his every move, leaving an untraceable number of afterimages. Once of it was the ages of time. The flow of time, a fundamental rule of the world, is unaffected by anything in the heavens or earth. This divine ability shared this characteristic, functioning unimpeded even under the suppression of a true person's power. Tan Xiangying's chest burned with anger. This insignificant brat, who should have been easily subdued, dared to resist. He thrust his spear, the force already considerable, increasing the power to 90%. A ceaseless clang of metal, a relentless symphony of impact, resembled the endless downpour of Yangzhou's rainy season, a somber rhythm suggesting an eternity without sunlight. Weighing heavier, the Tai Chu hammer and the heavy steel spear must have collided countless times in that instant of contact. On the second impact, Tan Xiangying became wary. He sensed a distinct alternation between solid and illusory strikes from the spear. The solid strike was manageable, even Kai Ting's immense strength couldn't bridge the gap between realms, but the illusory strike was devastating. The overwhelming force vanished without a trace, leaving the spearhead empty, devoid of purchase. Though Tan Xiangying wasn't yet on the verge of defeat, the alternating blows, light and heavy, were excruciatingly painful. The two heavy war weapons separated, the deafening clang almost causing deafness, and the dark, oppressive, heart-piercing clang finally ceased. Kai Ting and Tan Xiangying stood several zhang apart, facing each other, apart from a slightly sullen expression. Tan Xiangying was unharmed. Kai Ting, however, was pale, his lips pressed tightly together, his dark eyes like bottomless abysses, clearly showing he had lost the upper hand. In fact, given the disparity in their cultivation levels, the fact that he was still standing was beyond everyone's expectations. Tan Xiangying had no intention of giving Kai Ting any time to breathe. His spear described an arc, the spearhead glowing with a bloody, crimson, and eerie light at that moment. Coming incredibly fast, it started on the distant shore, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived within arm's reach. Accompanying it was a torrential sword intent. Dense as autumn rain. This episode is complete. Welcome to subscribe. Turn on the small bell forward. Please leave your comments. I will continue to update the content behind.